Hello everyone, this is Sukanya Rana and welcome again to the Streak Initiative, where we'll be covering some important topics from your current affair news. And this week we'll be covering the economics section. We've already done 2 videos in the last 2 days, and I hope they helped you in quick revision of some of the topics from economics. Okay. Now, before moving on to today's question, again, I would request you to go and register in the link that is provided in the description box, because that link will help you to get free material for UPSC preparation in terms of current affairs, compiled questions, both from Santosh sir videos, mine video, and also Ravi sir's video, and a couple of other things. Free mentorship will be provided to you. So go ahead, just register. It's completely for free. And let's start with today's video. And the very first question that today we're going to talk about is about dedicated freight corridor. Basically, there are 3 statements related to infrastructure. Now, infrastructure is something very important, and it has been throughout, I think, in the last 1 year. So let us look at the questions here. So there are 3 statements given, and you have to point out which is the correct statement. So the first statement is that the dedicated freight corridor aims at the reduction of unit cost of transport with higher speed of freight trains and better turnaround of wagons. The second is regarding a trade infrastructure for export scheme aims to assist the creation of appropriate infrastructure for the growth of exports from the states. And the last is based upon multimodal logistics parks shall act as a hub for freight movement, enabling freight aggregation, distribution, and multimodal transportation. Now, if you've been following the current affairs for last 1 year, I think this scheme, this park, and dedicated freight corridor all have been there in the news. So, whenever you go through any current affairs, it's very important that you have a brief idea about what each and everything term means here. So the first statement obviously is right. We all know that dedicated freight corridor is talking about actually freight trains. So it's not common passenger transportation we're talking about. So it's basically freight trains that we're talking about, and it will help for a better turnaround of wagons. Now, it is the basic ideology behind this particular corridor is to provide this high-speed connectivity, greater infrastructure, and connecting 2 borders. Like there are 2 different corridors that have been created. One is the Eastern Corridor, which is going to connect your Punjab to West Bengal and Dhakuni, and another is your Western, which again takes from Dadri in Uttar Pradesh to your Mumbai, the Jawaharlal Nehru Port Trust, right? So also one more thing important here is you should know which particular bodies is funding which. So Eastern is being funded by your World Bank, Western is funded by your Japan International Cooperation Agency. So this is an important piece of news with respect to dedicated freight corridor. So the first statement is right. Now, the second statement is talking about a scheme. So, trade infrastructure export scheme. So, before this particular scheme, there was this aside scheme. But since after this particular aside scheme would also take care of export related infrastructure development. But after 14th Finance Commission, what happened was this particular scheme was delinked from the center, and now the investment did not flow to states from center for development of any kind of export infrastructure. So in 2015, we had this we had this particular scheme which was launched by the center, and the basic idea here is that center is going to help the states develop a lot of different export related infrastructure. So there are things like land custom stations, testing, quality and certification labs are there that has been created, cold chain, trade promotion center, dry ports, that has also been in news recently. So all these are being created under this particular scheme. And also a lot of different commodity boards, SEZ authorities, and also export promotion councils. All these are agencies which can have financial support under this particular scheme. So this is a brief idea about this particular scheme. Again, since we're talking about corridor and connection, so make sure you are aware about some of the schemes that are related to infrastructure also. Like Bharat Mala and Bharat Yojana and all these things are pretty common. Sagar Mala, all right. But other than that, also look out for few schemes which are not that common and they might be asked in your paper. So second statement is also right here. The third statement is talking about multimodal logistics park. Now, recently it was in news that the first multimodal logistics park was created in India, and that was in Assam. And that was again under your Bharat Mala Pariyojana. So again, we have an infrastructure related scheme, infrastructure related development. So again, important piece of news with respect to infrastructure. So the third statement is also right, because these parks are actually aimed at providing freight related aggregation, improving the movement, taking care of the distribution, logistics, everything. So this is a very important development that happened with respect to infrastructure. And also I think not only Northeast, this particular multimodal logistics park will not only improve the accessibility to Northeast, but also help in our international relations also. Like we can connect to Bangladesh and all these places through even waterways terminal in this particular park. So that will also help improve our export related policy. So guys, all the statement in this particular question are right. So we have D as the answer in this question. Now let's move on to the next question, and the next question is related to your price index. So inflation related question. So this is basically talking about consumer price index for industrial workers, that is CPI-IW. So basic knowledge about it. The first statement talks about what does it measure. That is very important with respect to any index. You should know what does it measure, what are the various weight and distribution of different percentage in each of the index is very important. So it measures retail price of a fixed basket of goods and services and being consumed on an average working class family. Okay, and the second statement is it is compiled by who? So the statement states it's Ministry of Finance. Now inflation related indexes are very important. So in India we have WPI, right, which is wholesale price index, and then there is consumer price index. So the basic idea behind wholesale price index is that it's going to measure all the inflation rates or all the price index at the first point, that is at the wholesale price. And that was, I think, the basic drawback of this particular measurement, that it never calculated how the consumer are feeling the heat of the inflation. And that is why we have this particular index, which is consumer price index, which actually measures the retail price. So saying that, I think you understood that the first statement is right. Even though there's this term of industrial workers, but still it measures the retail prices of the working class, right? And WPI is actually compiled by your Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Commerce and Industry. So it is compiled by that. And CPI, again, CPI have a number of certain indexes. Like there is this industrial worker index, then there is this agricultural labor index, then there is this rural labor index, and then finally that combined index, which was made recently also. Now, it's very important to know that the first three index that I talked about, similarly here, industrial, agriculture and labor, all these are actually compiled and produced by your Labor Bureau, which is under Ministry of Labor and Employment. So that is very important. Make sure you know WPI under Commerce Ministry and the CPI. These three CPI are under your Labor Ministry, that is Labor Bureau. And finally, the combined CPI combined is actually under CSO. That is again Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. So there are three ministries involved in compilation of these basic inflation indexes. And be careful you do not mess them up, when you're revising. Before I move on to the next question, so I want to point out here, see, the basic idea behind calculating this particular CPI for industrial worker is that, see, this kind of index is very important in calculation and revising the wages for industrial workers. And also all the DA, the dearance allowance that they get, that is also calculated upon these particular index. So these index not only play a very important role in statistics, providing the general idea about the economy, but also it's very useful in fixing a lot of different wages, DA, with respect to the employers, with respect to the people who are working in that particular industry. So this index covers a lot of different industries, covering your mines, plantation, railways, public transport. So all these people actually get benefit, direct benefit out of this particular measurement of this index. So I think we're done with this question. And since the second statement here says that it is under Ministry of Finance, and this was like not involved in any three index, in any three ministries that we talked about. So this statement is wrong, and we have only A as an answer for this particular question. The next question is talking about your Essential Commodities Act. So it was recently amended in 2020, and this is important that because this particular act is in news a lot of time, and especially in times of this pandemic, this there were amendments in this particular act as well. And we've known through if you've been covering this particular idea, it's very common to know that there were certain issues with respect to this particular act. So the new amendment act is actually aimed at making sure that those loopholes or those disadvantages are taken care of. So let's look into the statement here. So the first statement here is that it provides foodstuff, including cereals, pulses, potatoes, onions, edible oil seeds, oil, shall be regulated under extraordinary circumstances, which may include war, famine, and natural calamity of grave nature. So important thing to note here is some people think that it's only dealing with your foodstuff related items. So it's foodstuff as well as your commodities like oil. So that is one thing where people can get confused. So don't get confused. It's like both of these ideas are covered in this particular act. The second statement here is actually this is particularly in relation to the amendment that was made. So it provides that any action imposing stock limit would be based on a price trigger such as 100% increase in retail price of horticulture produce. So this was kind of a limit that was there in the amended act. So basically both the statements are right here. So there are a couple of things that you should know with respect to this particular act. So one thing that I told you is it consists of a lot of different areas like the food stuff and even your commodities like oil. Now again, like the second statement here talks about that if there's a 100% increase in the horticulture produce, then we're gonna impose a stock limit with respect to this particular act. And if there's a 50% increase in the retail price of non-perishable agricultural foodstuff, and that too they've given a time limit of say in the last 12 months or the aggregated or the average price of retail in the last 5 years, whichever is lower, then you can have stock limits that can be imposed. So see, it's like having this particularly detailed idea about the percentage and the years and what criteria we're going to take and then put a stock limit is very important, because this provides clarity to the market, to the producers, to the investors when this act is going to be applied. So it removes the vagueness and the arbitrariness of the government that was present before. Right? So this is very important in bringing about the trust in the system and reducing the misuse of this particular act. Right? So this point is important in this sense. And I think even from mains point of view, you should know what is the idea behind it. Another thing here is in this particular act, like there was major flaw with respect to last act was it did not take care of certain exceptions of, say, exporting sector or the agricultural sector. So every time there was a stock limit imposed upon, say, agricultural sector, this demotivated a lot of investors from investing in your infrastructure for agriculture, like the cold chain network that was not set up, because they ultimately, if you're investing into a sector where there might be a stock limit that can be imposed, then all your investment for that storage would go down the hill, right? So that was a big flaw that did not allow the right kind of investment to flow into your agriculture sector. So this time we have certain set of exemptions that has been provided for the exporters, the processors, the value chain participants, as well as the public distribution system. So this will allow from the excessive regulatory interference that has been going with respect to this act, and give relief to this particular section of the stakeholders, right? So in that sense, it's very important, and I think this will allow a lot of investment into cold chain and storing facilities, especially for the perishable goods in the infrastructure for agriculture, and basically, even promote your further down the hill industries, like all the food related packaging, everything can actually benefit out of this particular amendment, right? So with respect to this answer, both the statements are right, and you have answer as C in this particular answer. Next, let us move on to again an inflation related question. So this question is about actually flexible inflation target. So a couple of years back, like in 2016, RBI had shifted to this model of flexible inflation target, where it would set a target and give a bandwidth for it to take care of inflation in that particular range. So this was an important development, and I think we've been like after this particular change that has happened, there have been a couple of reports also on introspecting how this particular change has helped to grow and take care of inflation in India. So that is very important, and in fact flexible inflation target is one of the internationally followed practice. So that was very important with respect to India when it when it adopted this particular practice. Now in this statement, if you look at the first statement here, so it says that the Reserve Bank of India Act 1934 was amended to provide a statutory basis for flexible inflation targeting framework. Now this can be a confusing statement, like whenever you think about a flexible inflation target, you would think that it's a policy statement related idea. So if it's a policy statement related idea, why would it require amending the RBI Act, right? And does it have a statutory basis or not? So in that sense, I think this statement can be a bit confusing. The next statement here is that India adopted a mandate of 6% plus and minus 2, and the WPI index as the key indicator. Now this is more factual. If you've read the news, I think you'll be able to identify whether this is right or not. Again, the answer for this particular question is actually A. The second statement is wrong. The first statement is right. So yes, guys, the RBI Act was actually amended to take care of this particular inflation targeting idea. It is it does look like a policy initiative, but no, it has a statutory basis behind it, and that is why it was amended. So your statement 1 is right. Statement 2 is wrong, because here it will not be 6%, it is 4% plus minus 2. So the range is around 2% and 6%. This is where the inflation is something that RBI is targeting for, and any lower than that, any greater than that, then they have to give explanation to the government. So that is the target, and also the index that has been mentioned here is WPI is wrong. It's CPI. In fact, after this particular adoption of CPI is something that we've been more looking and engaging with CPI. Before that, Usually WPI was something that was more focused upon policy making. Like this particular index was involved in a lot of policy making decisions. But after adoption of CPI, we've seen a shift towards CPI as becoming a major criteria to take care of a lot of policy decisions. And, in fact, after every 5 years, the government and RBI actually decides and sets the inflation target. Like they can change it, say for 4%, they can change it to some other number also. But that is a decision that they take after every 5 years. So that is also for this particular question, and you have answer A, which is right. So let's move on to the last question of the day, which is related to something that was there in your union budget. Now, budget is again very important for prelims and also the economic survey. Make sure whatever initiative that have been announced in the budget, you go through them in a bit more extensive manner. If you're going through the summaries of budget, again, Google these particular initiatives that have been provided in the budget and make sure you have an idea about what are they, what is the basic ideology, basic features, basic points behind it. All that should be pretty much clear to you. That is very important. So one thing that was mentioned in union budget was National Bank for Financing Infrastructure and Development. So with respect to that, we have two statements. Number one, that it is first ever development bank to be set up in India. And second is, it is financed by both the government and the private sector in equal proportions. So this is also important. If you've gone through this particular body, then you might be able to answer this question. So the first statement here is something I think that you can guess from your basic notes of economics also, because whenever you're doing that banking sector chapter, you do go through the idea of developmental banks. And see, developmental banks idea has been very old in India. So it's a very common sense that it cannot be something that we've recently developed, right? So something in 2021 is not, you cannot say that development bank is first ever created in 2021, because this idea has been talked about in a lot of previous sections also, in your basic static core portion also. And I think the first ever development bank that was set up was IFCI, your Industrial Financial Corporation of India. So I think this statement can be pretty much done with the idea of your basic knowledge from the static portion. Again, you should know what is a development bank, what is the basic difference between a development bank and a commercial bank. So that difference is very important. If you do not know, please Google it, go through it. It's important from the mains point of view also. So the first statement is wrong here. The second statement is talking about how is it financed. Now again, this particular body is completely financed by the government, and there's an initial capital of 20,000 crore. So that is also a bit factual, that you should know where is it being financed by, and all those ideas is important. Like some of the bodies that have been recently created, like there was this Payment Infrastructure Development Fund. So it had a capital of say 500 crores, and 50% was actually given by RBI, and the rest would come through the other card holding and other private infrastructure. So again, see, there can be this model also where government is inputting certain amount of finance and the other is coming from the private sector. So that is my point here, is just be careful which body is financed completely by government and which is financed both by the government and the private sector. Because there was this question in Prelims 1 where they actually had put the amount as well. So you had to identify the amount, though the amount was pretty much big, I think. So one could have guessed it through common sense that that is not possible. But I think, yeah. So the second statement is also wrong here. So we have neither 1 and 2 as the answer. So that's it, guys. These are the questions for today. And I hope they were a good way to revise some of your topics in prelims. I've pointed out certain areas, go through them, revise your union budget, take an opportunity, like when you close this particular video, open the union budget, look at some of the ideas, and maybe we'll be covering certain ideas from union budget in tomorrow's videos as well. So keep studying, all the best, and do register in the link that has been provided below. Thank you so much.
Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon on the YouTube app and never miss another update from Civilsdaily.